Ros, you've been teaching using Silent Way for many, many years. During that time, the communicative approach has swept the board. Everywhere around the world, people teach communicatively. How is it that you've been swimming against the tide?
I think the main reason would be that I don't believe that language is for communication. I think that's a very superficial view of things. If I look at myself, for example, I talk to myself constantly from the beginning of when I wake up until when I go to sleep, and I'm even quite sure that I talk to myself while I'm in my sleep.
Right.
So that, and I wouldn't call that communicating with myself. What I'm doing is expressing myself to myself, and this is how I come to understand what I think. For example, I'm very aware of the fact that when I'm preparing something, I talk to myself and I think that's not the right way of expressing it, it should be done this way. So what I'm doing is trying things out and learning how to express myself when I come to the moment when I want to say it. Obviously, many of the things I say, if I'm just talking to somebody, what I think I'm doing is I express myself, the other person responds in some way, and they reveal themselves, and then I speak again, and I reveal myself to the person. I express myself. Express, in fact. Expression is, there's a pressure, impression in French.
Yes.
Ex, to get it out. Right? I have to have some reason for saying something, and I do have some reason for saying something, and then out it comes. And so this is for me what language is about. Language is about how I structure my thought, it's about how I think, it's about how I live my life. I talk to myself constantly. So I would say language is for expression and not for communication. We can communicate. Perhaps.
We do communicate.
We do communicate. What we don't know when we communicate is, I don't know whether you actually are making the right mental pictures when I say what I say. So we suppose that we're communicating, but we're never actually quite certain. I'm very aware of the fact when I talk about Silent Way, for example, that I know that people are not making the mental images that I would want them to make, because they have no idea how you can teach a language without saying anything, how the teacher could function. So their mental images just don't exist. And
all right, so you're claiming that language is for expression rather than communication, or Gattegno, in fact, first made that point.
Absolutely.
What's the implication of that? Why is that relevant? How does that change anything?
Well, it changes it because in the classroom, what I want people to do is to be in touch with their energies and express what they want to say. Okay. Now, this means that I couldn't possibly use a book, for example, because a book lays it all out. What I want people to do is have something to say, get themselves geared up to say it, and then they're in a situation where, how do you say that? And there, the energy is right, they have something to say, and what I can do is pin the language onto that, and they can then say it. And this is how people stick language to their inner movements, if you like. They have to stick it. An emotion is an emotion. There's a motion in it, which is an energetic motion for me. Okay. People get angry, but there are much subtler emotions than these big ones like fear or joy or these kinds of things. These overwhelm us, but there are much subtler emotions than that. And for me, language is it's something that I use to translate my emotions into something that can go outside the X in expression.
Okay. So, if I'm hearing this right, this is a bit like training. We're talking about what you're saying is that in a language classroom, you should be training for the task, in the sense that what people are learning a language for is to be able to convert some sort of inner movement, some desire to say something into the language which expresses it. Yes. And what we need to do in the language classroom is to be doing that process and not some other process.
Yes, exactly. I think so. Yes. Okay. It seems to me that if you're using a book, for example, then what's going to happen with the book is going to suggest certain things.
Right.
But this is a very intellectual exercise. What they're saying is, if such and such an emotion comes up, this is what you do.
This is what you would do.
This is what you would do if it came up. Right. But that's not at all the same thing as letting it happen and then sticking the language to it. This is a much more efficient process.
Well, efficient, correct process. I mean, this is what what the students want to do, therefore this is what we're training them to do.
Exactly.
Whereas, I mean, I would, certainly in the grammatical approach, if you take a grammatical approach to language learning, clearly that's all at an intellectual level.
Yes.
But even if you take the sort of communicative approach, I mean, I think because we agree about this, our grouse with it would be that it's still artificial, because the person, even though they might be pretending to communicate about, you know, whatever transactional thing they're going through in the textbook, it's not starting with a genuine movement of somebody wanting to say something for
exactly.
themselves.
It's all a pretense.
Yes.
In fact, it's all pretending. This is why I'd never do a role play. I want people to talk about themselves.
Yes.
One of the only rules in my classroom is every sentence must be true.
Right.
It will end up being correct as well, but it must be true. If I get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm not going to say I get up at 8,
Yeah.
because I get up at 7.
Yeah.
And so people are describing their lives, and I get them to describe their lives in great detail, and we use that when I'm teaching tenses, for example. It's all about what people actually do in their lives.
Right.
For example, it's quite surprising in actual fact. When I'm trying to launch what I call a class conversation, what happens is that I launch a sentence and we work on it until it's correct. And one that I very often use is, what did you do last weekend?
Okay.
Right? And so we all work on what did you do last weekend until it can be said well by everybody in
You
the
mean
class.
the question can be said.
We work on the question, what did you do last weekend? And then once everyone can say it decently, I ask somebody to ask somebody else. So somebody volunteers and asks somebody else. So they might say, Robert, what did you do last weekend? And it's amazing the number of times Robert turns to me and he says, what do I answer? And I say, I have no idea, I wasn't with you last weekend. Oh, you want me to actually answer?
Yes.
Yes, of course I do.
Yes.
Right? But Robert, in fact, has done 7 years of school English and he doesn't know that. Right?
He's never been asked. He's never genuinely been asked in a class.
What did you do last weekend?
It's extraordinary.
Yes. And this is something that really pains me.
Yeah.
This should not be.